The parable in this gospel passage is a difficult one to understand. Are there any good guys in this story? Because the only honest person in the whole passage is Jesus. Yet I think if you were hard-pressed to give the parable a title, it might be something like, The Good Example of a Dishonest Man. The steward was a scoundrel. He was a cheat. Though he would have been considered a slave to the master, nevertheless he was in charge of running the master's property. There was a lot of absentee landlords in Palestine at that time, and it appears that this master was one of them. We are informed that the master has been told that the steward had been squandering his property. He tells the steward, "You can no longer be my steward," and then demands a full account of his stewardship. We aren't told whether the steward was a poor manager, whether he was mismanaging the property, or embezzling, cheating, stealing money. But based on his actions at this point, we can reasonably conclude that he was embezzling money. What does he do now? He uses the time he has left in his current employment to set himself up for a favorable position down the road. He endears himself to the master's debtors. And as the parable unfolds, we learn that one of the steward's responsibilities was to manage the master's debts. He had the authority to make loans, set the terms, and collect the payments in his employer's name. And whenever the steward entered into a transaction, it was understood that he was acting on behalf of his wealthy master, and therefore had his support. So the dishonest steward proceeds to cook the books in order to win friends among his master's debtors. He calls the debtors in one by one, we are told, and tells them to rewrite their loan agreements for a lesser amount. We're only told about 2 examples of them. He cuts the first debt by 50% and reduces the second one by 20%. And these debtors are no pillars of integrity either. They don't ask any questions. They don't know if the steward is doing this under his master's orders or out of his own sudden generosity. And they don't know that he's been fired because he doesn't tell them. It doesn't matter to them, however, because the results are the same. Their debts are reduced. That's the bottom line for them. Money, not honesty. They're taking advantage of the steward's possible dishonesty. And the master's a bit of a rogue himself, because he's not shocked by the steward's actions. He doesn't scold him for what he does, but in fact commends him for acting prudently. He appreciates the shrewd thinking behind them and actually praises the steward for what he's done. Jesus' immediate comment after he finishes telling this parable is interesting. He says, "The children of this world are more prudent in dealing with their own generation than are the children of light," a reference to his disciples. It's important to recognize that our Lord is not commending the dishonest steward here. He's not suggesting that we should act dishonestly or manipulate situations for our own benefit and cheat people. What he's acknowledging is the steward's quick action and cleverness, but he's not approving his methods. Jesus is implying that if only Christians were as eager and ingenious in their attempt to attain goodness as those with more worldly concerns are, in their attempts to make more money and gain more comfort, they would be much better Christians. He's saying if people would spend as much attention on the things which concerns their souls as they do on the things that concern their pocketbooks, they would be much better people, and the world would be a much better place. Near the end of this passage from the Gospel according to Luke, Jesus also says, "No servant can serve 2 masters. You cannot serve both God and mammon." Mammon being money, of course. Now that doesn't mean you have to give away all your money and material possessions and become the next St. Francis of Assisi or Mother Teresa. although those would be good things to do. What our Lord means by these words are that you need to make a decisive choice in your life. You need to choose between the world and the Spirit. You can still have money and material things. You can live in a nice house. You can strive to be successful in whatever work or profession you're in. You can live a comfortable life. But be careful about those worldly things. Don't get married to them, so to speak. Don't let them own you. Understand that they're not an end in themselves. Because you're not going to take your summer home or your job or your closet full of expensive clothes with you when you die. Realize that your spiritual needs have to be a priority in your life, because in the long run, they count for more. So make room and time for prayer in your life. Help the needy and the poor. Frequent the sacraments. Fulfill your Sunday obligation by attending Mass every Sunday, unless you have a legitimate excuse not to go. If you do these things, you'll experience a real sense of peace in your life, and you'll find favor with God. And you'll be helping to ensure yourself a place in heaven. And what could be better than that?